All right, we got y'all's attention. All right, good evening and thank you for sitting through another 3 hours of presentations. I'm sure you're all eager to get to another blockbuster discussion at the immediate conclusion of our presentation, so we'll get right to it. My name is Christian Allen. I've been a Clarke County resident since 2001 and a youth soccer coach at Holland-Clarke since 2003.
My name is Mike Carswell. Good evening, by the way. I've been a resident of Athens-Clarke County since 1987. I've been coaching at Holland-Clarke since 2005. We're representatives of the Holland-Clarke Youth Sports Coalition, comprised of 3 nonprofits, which is Athens Little League, Athens United Soccer, and Holland-Clarke Ravens. Together, our organizations represent more than 1,600 member families ready to support the SPLOST referendum. For those who may not be familiar with it, James R. Holland Youth Sports Complex is located on Benson Drive in north central Clarke County, as you can see on the slide. It's 62-acre park, opened in 1993, a little over 25 years ago. It features 4 multi-purpose fields and 7 baseball fields. Funding for the park came from the 1987 SPLOST project. On any given weekday, weeknight, weekend, 10 months out of the year, Holland-Clarke is one of the busiest places in the city. You have several football teams playing. You have not basketball, but baseball and soccer, sometimes all simultaneously. You find people circling the parking lots for parking space. People walking to and from the games. Games going on all throughout the day, especially on the weekends. It could be from sun up to sundown. And then you also have the people out here who are not involved in organizational activities, but they just like to come and enjoy the park. They bring their kids to play. They come to walk. They come to cycle. They come to picnic and enjoy just the park atmosphere. And the kids range in ages from 4 to 19.
Having attended last week's presentations and discussion myself, I know that everybody on the panel is well aware of the state of the county's park system, so I don't need to show you images of broken water fountains or toilets, of accidents that take place at the park's entrance, of drainage systems that are inadequate to keep up, that close fields and force frequent cancellations of events. You are all already well aware that Leisure Services capital improvements budget has been chronically underfunded. And basically what I'm here to tell you instead is that those circumstances take a toll on Holland-Clarke, just as they have on the other parks you've already had a chance to hear about. Some of the concerns unique to Holland-Clarke include pedestrian and spectator safety, and then amenities like concessions, bathrooms, and playground facilities that are woefully inadequate to keep up with the park's heavy and sustained use. One wonders how a 62-acre park conceived for the intent purpose of serving local youth can have just one tiny playground. I do want to mention one element of the proposal that actually managed to achieve some addition by subtraction, and that is in removing 12,000 square feet of concrete and aluminum bleachers wrapped around the corner of soccer field 4. These bleachers have very limited current utility. They were actually installed to house the international press covering soccer teams training to play games at Sanford Stadium in the 1996 Olympics. So by removing those bleachers, we not only create space for more current useful amenities, but also ensure that the project as a whole doesn't end up exceeding the current quantity of impervious surfaces at Holland-Clarke. So there's both an aesthetic benefit there, but really maybe more importantly, there's a practical cost-saving benefit because the project doesn't need an additional stormwater management plan. As you can see on this slide, this is basically a bird's eye visualization of the ask. Okay, and there's a lot more details in the proposal itself. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at it, but want to hit the highlights here. And those include improved traffic circulation. They include the installation of walking paths around the park itself, but also connecting the 3 main field areas, It includes installation of protective fencing and netting to keep the action on the field. It involves the installation of covered viewing areas that can also double as shelters from bad weather. It includes the renovation expansion of the existing playground, also the installation of the second playground area near the baseball quad, and finally, for the major components, a renovation and a second-story expansion of the park's concession and bathroom buildings in their existing footprint.
Also, we'd like to mention the importance of updated concession facilities, especially with those being some of our primary sources of revenue to fundraise to support scholarship programs that all three of our organizations generally do, to allow underprivileged children to participate. We see three broad areas of positive community for impact from this project. We'll breeze through them. We're a little short on time, so we'll breeze through them and hopefully you'll have some questions. First off is the positive activities for the kids that bring enrichment, good sportsmanship, positive development for spiritual, social, and physical development.
We really want to make sure we drive home tonight from this presentation that Holland is a community park. Not because it was designed to be a community park, because it wasn't, but rather because it happens to sit right in the midst of a cluster of economically disadvantaged neighborhoods between Newton Bridge Road and Jefferson River Road. It's a community park because so many kids that live in these neighborhoods participate in our programs. And obviously the project as proposed benefits those kids, it benefits the remainder of 1,600 other families who participate in our programs who might not live in this area, but really more importantly, I think it improves the usefulness and welcoming nature of the park as a community park for local residents, even if they don't have kids who happen to be involved in our actual programming. And I had heard that there is a proposal in this round seeking funding for installation of sidewalks on Vincent Drive. And without knowing anything else about that proposal, I want to take some time in hours to endorse that proposal. I know both Mike and I have talked about it. We each have kids who live in the area, who walk along Vincent Drive to get to practice, and then walk home along Vincent Drive to get to practice. Afterwards, typically after dark. We're not just talking about teenage players. We're talking about players as young as 8 years old who are walking up and down Vincent Drive in the dark without sidewalks. So it's obviously both a practical, meaningful, and symbolic way of linking Holland Park to the community nearby. I want to mention briefly before we move on that there is a legitimate and fairly substantial positive economic impact of sports operations at Holland Park that you may not be aware of. Holland Park regularly hosts competitive travel teams from around the state of Georgia and even out of state. Athens Night alone hosted 650 out-of-county teams in league and tournament competition last year, and that equates to roughly 40,000 visitors to the county, who account for no less than $2 million in local spending on gas, on groceries, on meals, sporting goods and other local shopping, attractions, and hotel rooms. Our project directly addresses 4 of the priority action items that Envision Athens came up in their community development plan. Obviously, we see Holland Park as a place which promotes health and well-being for the community citizens, and does so, more importantly, I think, in a cost-effective and proactive way. I find it interesting, the discussions in that document of both land use and infrastructure both emphasize the importance of redevelopment as opposed to new development, and the importance of taking care of what we already have. And I find it interesting that both of those notions received universal support in the discussion they all had about their presentations last week. Finally, I want to call attention to the importance of creating gathering spaces available to all, so residents feel a strong connection to each other. And in doing so, I want to call your attention to a couple of maps I find very interesting. I'm a geographer by trade and education. I'd love to take credit for having made these, but I didn't. I actually lifted them from a Title VI report that was put together in 2014 by Athens Transit System. But I think they make a point that we can make as well. And if you notice this area in north central Clarke County, this intensely purple area. That is exactly the geographic area we just got done talking about that's centered on Holland Park. I don't know, 10 minutes went fast. This is the densest population of Hispanic residents in the county, or the classic definition of a marginalized population. Look around the room, 15 to 20% of Athens-Clarke County is Hispanic. I don't believe there are any in the room. That area also happens to be disproportionately African American. We can tell similar narratives about marginalization there, but really don't have the time. So I guess at that point we'll conclude, plead for your support, and open the floor to questions.
Question.
So all this park bench space, can any of that be reutilized for I don't know, scrap metal or for help toward funding?
I would think at the very least it has scrap value. I mean, there's a whole lot of aluminum there. But I would imagine it probably has utility, maybe even be sold off to something like an Athens Arena or somebody that has needs for that space. I mean, it's dirty, it's not used very often, but it's not dangerously decrepit. It just doesn't have very much utility. But yeah, I agree. I think it has some value to somebody, if for nothing else than scrap. Please.
Anybody else?
You mentioned, well, what percentage of kids that participate in your program would you estimate live sort of close by in that area? I know you just showed a map with previous areas of the county with marginalized populations. So if you, I guess, estimated that.
I mean, let me see if I can understand the question. Is it specifically about kids in our programs who live within walking distance locally, I'd call it, or people who live in disadvantaged communities anywhere in the county?
No, within that particular area.
I mean, do you have?
If I had to guess, I would say, I know for our football program, it's probably percentage-wise, I would say 33%,
Okay.
about a third.
I'd say more or less the same for Athens United. Certainly seen a remarkable increase in the number of Hispanics involved in soccer, and they're heavily concentrated in that part of the county for sure. So I would probably say 35% would be my off-the-cuff estimate. Sure.
This might be a question more for leisure services in general, but for the revenues for a project, if these changes were made, an increase in traffic and visitors to the park might translate to an increase in revenues from concessions. Is there any ballpark on how much we might look for, or how much currently is made in concession sales per year versus how much you might expect to get back? I'm looking for something that might bring down the operating cost and kind of take away the sticker shock for me about the ask for the proposal.
I mean, a couple of things. One is the county isn't directly involved in concessions.
Okay.
That is, the three organizations themselves use the concession stand, basically serving our own population of parents and visitors, and then we use the profits from that, again, as Mike suggested, to fund scholarship, our own in-house scholarship program. So the county has no direct involvement in concessions programs. And secondly, I don't think that these improvements are going to generate additional traffic. I don't know how you could have additional traffic to Holland Park. It is absolutely bursting at the seams to capacity. And so this isn't about increasing space. There's no space for new fields or anything else. This is just, with the massive use that it already gets, how can we manage that in a way that's safe and efficient, provides a good experience for citizens who use our sports program, local residents, and then 40,000 visitors a year. But I don't think it's a project that's going to increase usage. I don't know how it would be possible, quite frankly.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
These three organizations that you mentioned that sponsor various athletic activities, I assume they're not the exclusive users of the park. What proportion of the time of the park would you say these three organizations tend to use?
I mean, I guess I would say they're the exclusive concessionaires, if you will, for youth sports programming there. But certainly the park is open and available for all kinds of use outside the sports program. But at Holland Park, that's the home for those three organizations. I'm not aware of anybody else who who runs any sort of long-term sports program out of Holland. Obviously, there's places that run out of Trail Creek. There's other organizations that run out of Southeast-Clarke, but I'm not aware of anybody else that, at least in the long term, runs a sustained program out of
Yeah,
Holland.
we're the three primaries.
I was just trying to get a sense of what the use is beyond these three. If these are highly successful programs, they may very well consume the available time and space that is there. Is that
The
true?
available space is consumed.
We're over-consuming.
100% consumed, for sure, without a doubt. It is, I mean, as Mike suggested, I mean, you have to see to believe how busy it is from 5 to 9 p.m. 4 nights a week and on the weekends. It's, it wasn't hyperbole suggested. It was one of the busiest places in the city. That's the real truth.
Yeah, the original demand when this park was when this park was first built had probably quadrupled the demand for use from its original concept. So that's pretty much where we at a whole generation later. This generation has just grown. This city has grown, which in turn the activities have grown just because of the size of the population and the activity and the demand for all of the sports. Athens United Soccer is just huge. They have just, since the park started, it's probably times 10.
Part of it's a reflection of growing interest in soccer, part of it's an interest, a reflection of growing Hispanic population that happen to be located right on top of Holland Park. And I think the tale is the same for all the sports facilities in town, Holland, Trail Creek, and Southeast-Clarke. When we're looking to do tournaments or whatever, there's just no space anywhere, and they're all busy. And I guess the silver lining of it is there's a lot of youth in Clark County participating in organized sports programs, which I think is good, but the field space is absolute max, for sure.
Yes, ma'am.
When we're looking at, SPLOST lasting 10 years, and if those were funded, it could be towards the end, what are the things that you think are absolutely the most emergency situations that need to be dealt with?
I would say safer places for people to walk, where they don't have to worry about cars traveling and going in sharing that same space with cars coming through. Just more safe space created for people who just want to come and enjoy the park, that have small kids that kind of want to keep them out of harm's way, but keep them in a nice, safe area.
And there's not a hell of a lot to do at Holland Park in terms of facilities, unless you're involved in one of the sports programs. But people use it anyway because in that part of town is the only open green public space that's available. It's not that there's a whole lot to do, it's just there. But I agree 100%. It's pedestrian safety. I mean, I honestly think the county's inviting some liability concerns by not addressing pedestrian safety at Holland, to be honest.
Any other questions? Thank you all.
Pleasure.
Thank y'all. Thank you for your time.
You guys want to take a 5-minute